Approaching a conclusion of How the Great Religions Began by Joseph Gaer, Book 3, The Advance of the One God. The final part we come to is part 5, The Reformation, Out of the Dark Ages. It's funny how people revive ideas and principles and feel like they're advancing when it's been said and done before in a relative sense. No one can command or ought to command or by force compel any man's belief, said Luther, which is also something R.C. Christian would have wanted people to regard. Section 1. East is East and West is Rome. When Constantine the Augustus proclaimed Christianity as the state religion of the Roman Empire over 1600 years ago, he really offered to combine the church ideas about the kingdom of heaven with the Roman ideals about the kingdom on earth. The Roman Empire in those days had under its control almost all the civilized world, or so they thought. Its ideal was to extend its power the world over to rule the civil affairs of all mankind. The ideal of the Christian church was to convert all people in the world to Christianity and govern their spiritual affairs. When the church and state were wedded by Constantine, they were really united to rule all the affairs of men, both civil and religious. Through this union of church and state, great Roman Empire became the Holy Roman Empire. At that time, the church was ruled by many bishops under the five fathers who were known as patriarchs, from the Greek word meaning fathers. They were also called popes, from the Latin word meaning fathers. The most important of these fathers were the Pope of Rome in the west and the Pope of Constantinople in the east. From the very beginning, the Church of the East differed from the Church of the West, and the Pope of Rome was not at peace with the Pope of Constantinople. Christians everywhere began to think of Rome as holy ground, because Paul and Peter, as well as many other early Christians, had died there as martyrs, and because of that, the Pope of Rome considered himself the highest authority of the Church. But Constantinople was then the seat of the great Roman Empire, and the emperors looked upon Constantinople as the seat of the Church, and the place of the highest authority. So the Pope of Rome and the Pope of Constantinople were jealous of each other. There was another very important difference between the East and the West. In the East, Greek was spoken, and in the West, Latin. So, by this time, there were some significant differences in the churches, even though at first there were at least several united under the same banner of Catholic. Often when translations were made from the original Greek into Latin, the meaning of religious words slightly changed, and the beliefs and practices also changed. That caused much unfriendly discussion between the Church of the East and the Church of the West. As time went on, the differences between the churches of East and West became greater and greater, and the jealousy between the popes of Rome and Constantinople grew from day to day. Then arose a great dispute about idol worship. The early Christians, who were Jews, and those immediately after them, who were the Gentiles. No, they weren't Gentiles, they were just not Jews. Forbade the worshiping and use of images of any kind in the church. But in time, the Christians East and West began to make images. They made statues and paintings of the martyrs, of the saints, of the apostles, of Mary, and of Jesus. Some even tried to make images of God. In the West, they made mostly statues. In the East, they made mostly painted and gilded images. These painted and gilded images were called by their Greek name icons. Icon in Greek means image. The Christians came and kneeled before these images of stone, and painted wood and prayed to them, and believed that they had great powers. So, "Thou shalt not have any gods before me," was violated as a result of their violating the second commandment of not making any graven images. The Jews and later the Mohammedan Sufi order did occur for a while after Muhammad, began to scoff. The Muhammadiyah, wait, I think there is both, Mohammedan and Muhammadiyah. Okay, began to scoff at the Christians and said, "Look at those images, at those icons. They have eyes that cannot see. They have ears that cannot hear. They have hands that cannot stir. They have feet that cannot move. Yet these Christians worship. And then they tell us that their religion is better than ours." The clergy of both East and West realized the dangers of idolatry in the church. But the clergy of the East were powerless before the will of the emperors and their wives, who wished to have the images in the church, and the great dispute arose. These differences, among many others, gradually divided the Church of the East from that of the Church of the West. During the time Europe was overrun by hordes of barbarians, Goths and Huns and Gauls and Danes and Franks, who established what were later to become the kingdoms of England, France, Spain, and Germany. Under the Pope of Rome, these barbarians were converted to Christianity, or so they thought, and added greatly to the power of the Western Church. But while the strength of the Western Church flourished, the Roman Empire in the East began to crumble, and the gulf between East and West became wider and wider. In the year 1054, there came a final break between Rome and Constantinople, and the church became divided into the Greek Orthodox Church in the East and the Roman Catholic Church in the West. And I will continue later.